So in the last video for this week, I'm going to walk you through the writing process for the personal essay. All right, so what I'll do is I'll start off by helping you come up with your topic and working on a thesis. Then I'll help you come up with the details and kind of an organization for your essay. And then for the draft, this is when you'll really be employing what you learned last week about paragraphs, including opening paragraphs, topic sentences, and conclusions from chapter 17. And then for chapter 18 this week, you'll employ what you learned about details in the providing details exercise. And then lastly, for revising and editing, you can use the checklist at the back of chapter 4. And you can also focus on fixing any fused sentences, comma splices, or fragments that are in your writing. Now, before I dive into the writing process, I do want to talk about how to schedule your time, because one needed tool basically for writing a good essay is to know how much time it will take you. Okay, the writing process can't play out fully if you don't give yourself enough time. So the textbook is very helpful in giving you some approximate times. For Discover, they're saying probably 30 to 45 minutes. I think that might be a little much. You can probably do it definitely under 30 minutes for what I'm going to walk you through. And then for sources, planning, and drafting, this will probably take you actually between 2 to 3 hours, okay? And then for revising, editing, they're saying 2 to 4 hours. I think that's a bit much for this essay. It's only 2 to 4 pages. You can probably do most of your revising and editing within 1, maybe 2 hours at the most. So what might help you is to kind of create a little timeline for yourself. Maybe if you're trying to crank this out over the weekend, say, all right, by this time on this day, I will complete this step. And you can do that for each of these parts. And that might just help keep you on schedule and maybe even keep you accountable to yourself. So that's just a little suggestion for you. All right, step 1, discover. What I want you to do is take one of the methods from chapter 15 that we read last week, which covered like journaling, brainstorming, mind mapping, the journalist questions. Take one of those and then kind of use these ideas to help you come up with some moments from your life that might work for this essay. So there might be a moment of joy or happiness, an unexpected change, maybe a moment of sadness, or maybe a time when you took a risk. Now, what I recommend is coming up with at least 3 moments from your life that you're considering to write on. Don't just pick the first moment that comes to mind, okay? And once you've kind of generated a short list, then go through it and complete the sentence. I learned blank from my time blank. If you can't answer this sentence or complete it, then it probably means you do not have a good moment to write on for this essay and you need to find a different one. So go ahead, pause this video, and come back when you've selected your moment. All right, now that you have the moment in your life that you want to write on, I'm going to walk you through how to create a thesis, or really what I'm going to call a purpose statement. We don't often have thesis sentences in personal writing like we do for a research paper, but you still need to have a clear sense of why you are telling this story. And I like to look at the sample sentences from the Learning by Doing exercise, which you can find in our textbook. And basically what I'd like you to do is in the worksheet, answer these questions, okay? Or at least one of them. What's the most important thing about your experience? The main impression that I want to show my audience is blank. And I want to share this so that my readers blank. Okay? You only have to complete one of them. But if you can't complete this sentence, then it means you don't really have a clear focus for your story yet or a lesson behind it. So make sure that you have this in place and complete this activity in the worksheet. And when you are done, go ahead and come back and I'll walk you through the next step of the writing process. All right, for step 2, sources. What we're going to do is work on creating some details for your paper first. And what I've done is broken these details down to 3 areas. Action, which is basically what happened, that's like plot. Then character, who is involved, and setting and dialogue. So for action, think about this moment in time. How did it start? That would be your beginning. What happened kind of in the middle there? What was the conversation like? What were the different points that happened? And then for the ending, how did this moment resolve? What was it like? Okay. Now, for character, basically be thinking about who is involved. It's probably you and someone else, maybe a parent or a friend. Maybe it's a few different people, but you need to make sure that your reader understands who is involved in everyone there. Now, what were you thinking or feeling during this experience? This is real important. Readers like to know what was going on in your mind, not just the sensory details of what you were seeing and hearing and stuff. Now, what I recommend doing is for each character in your story, try to list 5 descriptive words for that person. And when you go to write, that'll kind of help you have something to put down. For setting and dialogue, kind of something similar. You need to make sure your reader understands where this took place and like when it took place, and what words would you use to describe this experience. Try to come up with at least 5. And then what was said in this experience. It really helps if you can come up with some dialogue. Of course, you're relying on your memory and you kind of have to probably shorten it or just do the best you can. But even just a few lines really livens up the story. So go ahead and pause the video and complete this section. I think it'll probably take you between 10 to 20 minutes to really come up with all the details and list out what happened in your story. So go ahead and do this and come back when you've finished. All right, so now that you have all these details, we're going to work on kind of forming the plot of the story and basically your outline. Now, for the beginning, middle, and end, what you may have discovered is, depending on how long of a process this moment was, maybe it spanned months, maybe it's even kind of covered a couple years. It is okay in your story to kind of condense things down, maybe leave some details out, maybe combine some moments together to get your point across. It doesn't have to be 100% factually accurate to what actually happened. You do have some creative license for this, okay? So now, if you feel like your story is best told in just pretty much a straightforward, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, then you're pretty much set. You know the chronology of events. But for some of you, especially if there was kind of a gap in time, maybe between the moment something happened and maybe the moment when you learned from that event, you may want to consider doing like a flashback. Maybe you start with the initial moment kind of as a flashback and then jump to the present or to a different moment. Or maybe you start in the present, you want to go and back to the past at some point and then jump back to the present, okay? So you do have some creative license for how to tell your story. Now, what I recommend is go ahead and pause this video and consider what's the best way and organization for telling your story. All right, now that you kind of have your organization mapped out from the previous slide, this is done. You have lots of details about the characters and the setting. You're kind of ready to write. You're ready to sit down and create a 5-paragraph essay. Now, I will say I'm not holding you real firm to a 5-paragraph format. It is a story. You can have some creative license and stuff. But the introduction should kind of set up the beginning of your story, and then the body should kind of be those middle moments of the story continuing, and then the conclusion should definitely focus on the resolution of how things end. So what you might want to do right now is pause the video, kind of go write your draft, or if you want, watch all the way through while I cover our last step of revising and then go and write the rest of your paper. Okay, so for revising, what I really recommend is going to page 65 and 66 at the end of chapter 4 and go through this checklist. It is a very, very helpful checklist that kind of helps you discover where some weaknesses might be in your story, for you to know whether or not your reader will understand what you're conveying through your experience. So you would want to focus on this part right here, writing from recollection. Okay, and then editing for the draft. This is kind of just a good checklist to go through. I would highly recommend you focus on fragments, comma splices, and fused sentences. I will mark off more for these because we've learned about them this week, so you should know how to spot them and fix them. But you also do want to focus on your MLA formatting and then punctuation, capitalization, and spelling. Okay, so just a quick overview. Chapter 4 is going to walk you through the entire writing process, and I've kind of walked you through what that chapter had. But if you need to go view some additional resources, how to kind of figure out what an assignment is saying, you can check out chapter 15, page 256 for that. The assignment, again, the instructions are in chapter 4. So you have plenty of example papers in chapter 4. You have lots of strategies for how to generate ideas from chapter 15. And then for how to write paragraphs, chapter 17, and details, chapter 18, and then some revising tips in chapter 4 and chapter 34. Okay, so if you have any additional questions that the textbook does not address, please reach out to me. My contact information is on MU Learn and in the workshop sheet, or the class work session worksheet. And I don't mind helping you through any parts where you're stumbling or getting confused. I'd rather help you through them and save you some time than for you to spend a lot of time kind of just struggling. So please reach out to me. If you're feeling pretty confident about this essay, great. And I'm looking forward to reading about all of your personal stories as they come in and as I'm reading your essays next week. So happy writing.